Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Random Vlogging for Daily December. So, today's day 3. Daniel Wallace and I, after asking on my last video stuff you guys would like to see, R2 mentioned she'd like to hear some of the stuff that I do to prepare for DMing and things like that. And Daniel Wallace has been doing a fair amount of stuff on DMing, or GMing as he calls it. And so we decided that today we were going to basically both talk about our different ways that we prepare for a night. Daniel and I have very, very different views on what it is to be a DM or a GM. Daniel puts a very large emphasis on his players contributing equally to the story, where basically as a GM, he tends to just technically be another player, which works for him. I've actually played, I had him as a GM once, and I wasn't particularly fond of the system we were using. We were using GURPS, and it just, for me, it was a little bit overly complicated, and I didn't enjoy the system, and other things came up that I wasn't able to attend our gaming session, so I eventually dropped out. But he was very much about the whole developing NPCs and things like that, and then letting the plot kind of evolve as people go along, which for him works. I strongly disagree with that statement. So what I do when I prepare, I'm actually I'm running a table tonight. I've got D&D encounters tonight, and because encounters are pre-written, most of the stuff that I run right now is pre-written campaigns. Just because the one place that I have a group meeting is at my friendly local game store on Wednesday nights, and we play D&D encounters because that's what we do on Wednesday nights. And I enjoy it. I have a lot of fun. The current storyline, like we're currently in Horde of the Dragon Queen, and we'll eventually be going to Rise of Tiamat. And they're well-written stories. We're currently in an area of the adventure where they're traveling from Baldur's Gate to Waterdeep, and it takes them about 2 months to go that distance. And so what it is they have all these different like random encounters that you can weave together to create a coherent plot, or use none of them. You know, I think there's only 3 events that technically are supposed to happen in order to kind of connect the story that's already going. So what I do when I prepare for a night is I first look at the overall plot that we're going to be going through. If it's a pre-made in adventure, I read everything I could possibly be doing that night. I go through all the different monsters. I look them up in my monster manual so I know roughly where they are. Usually, I don't always do this. The last couple weeks, I've kind of been just going up, and I prepare literally like 20 minutes before we start playing just by reading through. But yeah, I'll look up any monsters that I need to know about, any specific plot devices or anything like that that I really should be aware of. And then I always begin the night by retelling what has happened over the last few sessions. And sometimes I will do the retelling, sometimes I'll have one of my players do the retelling. But it's always that's always how we start, because it gets everybody back into, you know, what was happening, you know, kind of a last time on D&D High. It gets everybody back into the mindset. So yeah, to be honest, running a pre-made campaign is actually, for me, is actually a little bit less time consuming. I'm not going to say it's easier, because it's not. It's just running a custom campaign, which I've done before, takes a little bit more time, But to be perfectly honest, you also aren't constrained by following a plot that someone else wrote. You can really take it wherever you want. So yeah, you have a little bit more freedom, but it takes a little bit more time because you have to create everything. Um, so yeah, I'm a big believer in plot and having an overarching plot. Now, a lot of game masters or dungeon masters or whatever you want to call them, a lot of them will fall into the trap of they will make their plot too specific, and then their players will do something that doesn't fit into their plot, and either they have to rewrite everything or they have to try and railroad their players into a very specific path. Um, I've done that before. It just pisses off your players. Because one of the best parts about tabletop role-playing games is the freedom you have to literally do anything that you want. As long as you can imagine it, you can do it in general. So when I create a plot for my own custom adventures, I have an overarching plot line that is generally very unspecific. The last one I ran was in a custom campaign setting I created called the Kingdom of the Kale Islands, and it was a water pirate-based type thing. And so I had three major plot lines. I had the first one, which was basically they became pirates and became more notorious on the sea while they were fighting against the oppressive Eladrin government. Again, very, very general plot line that they could do whatever they wanted, and I could find ways to weave it into my general plot line. So I wasn't limiting my players. The only thing that I limited them on in that game was they had to become pirates. And so the first about 4 hours of the adventure was very kind of railroaded. They didn't have as many choices as they did later on. And that was simply to get them to the point where they were pirates. Because I didn't want to just go, oh, you're pirates, go for it. I wanted to give them a backstory and a reason. And it also let me create some recurring characters that they got to meet again and got to despise, or some that they loved. I killed off one of the characters, and that really affected them, even though they'd only known the character for a few hours. So that was a lot of fun. From that point on, I did a mixture of pre-made stuff that I just kind of fit into the campaign, and stuff that I wrote myself. And it went fairly well. Unfortunately, we all had to stop just because life got in the way, and we never got to complete the campaign. But I had the campaign planned up. It was a 4th edition campaign. Level cap in 4th edition is 30. So from 1 to 10, that was that first plot line. From 11 to 20 was the second plot line, which was, and I had started laying some seeds in the first one, they were going to try and overthrow this oppressive Eladrin government. And they could do it literally any way they wanted. So again, very broad, generalized idea, where it would be a lot of, I would introduce the idea of, listen, guys, you become notorious enough that the Eladrin government is going to try and take you out. So you have a bunch of options, but eventually there is going to be a conflict where you have to deal with them. So however you want to do it is fine. What do you want to do? And I had made some plans for a bunch of different ways that they could go. Everything from I had laid some interest earlier on of them recruiting different races and different groups to help storm the castle. I had one area where they were going to learn about where the Eladrin came from and how they crossed over into this specific world, where they could technically recruit help from another plane of existence if they wanted to go that route. or whatever they wanted. I kind of just went. I was planning on just going with it. Again, we never got that far. So what would have ended up happening then is once they took out this corrupt Eladrin government, they would find out that these people were actually fugitives from the Feywild from a massive interplanar war that hadn't really reached this specific area yet. And so the final, 21 to 30 would have been them slowly getting involved in this war and them deciding how they want to end it or continue it or, whatever they wanted. If they wanted the war to keep on going, they could. If they wanted it to just kind of, end and, they would have choices, anything from them becoming, lords over all these different planes to, setting up, a government or something. Like, they literally, their choices were entirely theirs. So that's what I think of when I say plot. Were there ways that they could do something? Could they just refuse to fight in the interplanar war? Yeah, of course they could. The thing with it is eventually the planes would start merging, and every so often they would get, someone from the plane, elemental plane of fire would randomly come on. And due to the fact that there was now kind of a power vacuum that they had created from getting rid of these Eladrin, and the fact that these fugitives had been discovered that that's where they went, they really were going to have to deal with it in some way, shape, or form. And it could have just been that they decided to close off access to any other planes of existence and just leave it that this world is kind of isolated, and that would have been really cool. So, I mean, again, it was one of those things where I have an overarching plot so that there's a purpose to everything that they do, but they have control over how the plot is solved. And that's the best way, in my opinion, to run a game. Because, and I've seen this happen far too many times, where you give players and just say, well, you can do anything that you want. And they're like, oh, okay, well, I want to do this. And there's no purpose to what they do. They're just like, well, let's go explore this dungeon. Okay, well, you cleared the dungeon. Congratulations. What do you want to do now? Well, there's really no purpose. Like, I killed off some dungeon denizens, and nothing changed. There's no reason for me to really do anything. I have no purpose in life. So yeah, I think that you should have very realistic, very three-dimensional NPCs. I don't agree with the idea that you need to put the burden of the plot moving forward on your players. First of all, that only works with established role players. I tend to play with new players all the time. That's what Encounters is for. I could not ask these people to completely run the game themselves. They don't know how to do it. And so they would just get bored or they'd get turned off to it and then they'd leave. So I have to have some sort of plot. And to be 100% honest, my players love the plot. Like, they really do. They love the fact that they're getting to interact with some very cool things. When I ran Legacy of the Crystal Shard, one of my players was a huge Drizzt fan. He was thrilled that he got to fight Icing Death, reanimated. And they got to deal with the Crystal Shard and Black Ice and all this stuff. These are all things that are part of the Forgotten Realms mythos that they got to interact with. They got to interact with some famous characters too. I mean, it was really, really fun for them. So yeah, that's basically what I do. I make sure I know what the generalized plot is. And I also, even when I'm running a pre-made campaign, I make sure to give my players as much leeway as is physically possible. The best phrase you can ever use as a dungeon master is, what do you want to do now? You just describe the situation, go, what do you want to do? and then make sure, and I think this is one of the things that Daniel and I will both agree on. There are very few of them. You need to make sure that what they do is not isolated to that specific area. Like I mentioned in my Kingdom of the Kale Isles, um, the fact that they overthrew the government had lasting effects not only on this particular plane of existence and this particular world, but all throughout the various planes, because that's how it would actually work. The reason these guys hadn't been found before was because they were keeping the portal closed. Now that there's nobody left to keep it closed, it opens up again, and bad stuff happens. And I think that's the most important aspect of running a campaign, is the idea that everything that they do has consequences. Some of the consequences are good, some of the consequences is bad. Consequences are bad. Wow, I can't even speak. But everything has consequences, and you have to make sure that you're taking that into account. I had a friend that ran a campaign where the hook in the beginning was he laid some seeds of, basically there's this necromancer that's trying to raise an undead army and take over the world, and the players went, you know what, we're not going to do that. We are going to go over here and we're going to do this. And they had an entire campaign and completely forgot about the necromancer. And that's great, and that's fine, and they had a lot of fun. And at the very end of the campaign, they had to deal with an unstoppable undead army because they never dealt with that. And that's a real thing. They never dealt with the fact that this necromancer was growing in power, and so by the time he actually attacked, he was literally unstoppable. And I think that turned into a TPK. And the players are like, well, wait a minute. And he's like, I told you guys, this is what's happening. Just because you guys didn't want to deal with the necromancer doesn't mean you went, oh, I guess I'll just... No, this is a living, thriving world, and you guys made choices, and that's absolutely fantastic. And now you have to deal with the consequences of those choices. All right? So I'm sorry this is kind of long, but this is a really, really tough subject and very, very detailed subject to talk about. So I will link Daniel's vlog in the comments below, so definitely check out his so you can see his side of it. We both have massively different ideas about how to run a campaign, and yeah, it's always good to find someone else's viewpoint. So again, that's all for me today. I will see you guys tomorrow for some more random vlogging for daily December. Bye-bye!